Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today. Now, did you see it? Sir Keir Starmer gave a press conference a couple of hours ago. Well, I say press conference and I've got to say, I use that term loosely. What I mean is, he's spoken to a select few members of the press. And no, of course, GB News was not one of them. Anyway, at said conference, he confirmed that he's going to resign if issued a fine re Partygate. Hang on a second though, because I can't help but think back to his tweet back in, I think it was January, where he was demanding the PM's resignation at the point where he is now, which was basically under criminal investigation. Double standards? Much? I think so. And Russia have today celebrated their Victory Day. President Putin has branded NATO as the aggressor and made it clear that he is not backing down anytime soon. So, what is the end game? And in a historic development, Sinn Féin has gained the most seats in the Northern Irish Assembly and the right to appoint the First Minister. This made me ponder then, do you think we are a step closer to the potential breakup of the United Kingdom? I really hope not. Also, I want to talk to you about job discrimination based on accents. Is it still a thing? I reckon so. We'll have all that to come and more, but first, the latest news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer has said he will step down as Labour leader if he's fined by police. It's after an investigation was launched into allegations he broke coronavirus rules at a curry and beer gathering in Durham in April last year. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, who was also at the event, has said she will also quit if fined, but insists no rules were broken. Sir Keir says he's always followed the rules.
I had to isolate 6 times during COVID, pulling me away from my work and the things that I love. But I did it because we followed the rules. The idea that I would then casually break those rules is wrong. And frankly, I don't believe those accusing me believe it themselves.
DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says his party will not form an executive until the UK government takes action over the Northern Ireland Protocol.
I'm not prepared to watch and stand on the sidelines as the can is kicked further down the road. That's not acceptable. They've had months to sort this out. It is their responsibility to do so. And I'm saying to the EU and to the UK government, I'm not interested in their parallel universe. I'm interested in the real world, which means sort this out and take the action now to remove the Irish Sea border.
Just a warning, there are some flashing images in this next footage. Sinn Féin's deputy leader, Michelle O'Neill, says it's Boris Johnson and the EU's responsibility to find solutions to the protocol, but that Northern Ireland will not be held to ransom by them. The would-be First Minister said the British government and the DUP must accept the result of the Assembly election. It's after Sinn Féin became Stormont's largest party, winning a historic 27 seats last Thursday.
The message is one of hope. It's also one of optimism for the future, where political leaders work together and they make politics work. That's my commitment as a political leader and as an incoming First Minister. So there can be no excuses, there can be no attempt by the DUP or by anyone else to punish the public and leave workers and families high and dry now or in the time ahead. As a First Minister for all, I intend to work with those from different political perspectives through partnership and not division.
Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis, has been holding talks with the 5 party leaders in Stormont today. Russia's president has claimed he is fighting for the motherland as he defended the invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin made the comments in a speech in Moscow's Red Square during the annual military parade, which celebrates victory in World War II. The UK's Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is accusing the Kremlin of trying to intimidate other countries during today's celebrations.
Putin, his inner circle and his generals are now mirroring fascism and tyranny of 77 years ago, repeating the errors of the last century's totalitarian regimes. They are showing the same disregard for human lives, national sovereignty and the rules-based international system.
Meanwhile, the Russian ambassador to Poland has been covered in red paint by protesters. Sergei Andreev and his entourage were attacked by a crowd in the capital, Warsaw. They were attending a wreath-laying ceremony marking the 77th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Mr. Andreev says no one was hurt in the incident and he remains proud of President Putin. Morrison's has won its bid to take over the collapsed corner shop company McColl's. The supermarket chain saw off a rival bid by EG Group, whose owners also run Asda. It's promising to save 16,000 jobs in the rescue deal. McColl's announced it had gone bust on Friday. Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick has been charged with 3 more counts of rape. The Crown Prosecution Service has increased the total charges against him to 44 offences involving 12 separate women. The 47-year-old will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Friday. The boss of Scottish Power says more needs to be done to lower energy bills ahead of winter as prices are predicted to go up again. Keith Anderson has urged the government to take action, adding that bills are due to rise by almost £1,000 for millions of households by next winter. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now it's over to Michelle and Dewbs Co.
Thanks for that. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, we've got Lee Jones, who's the Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, sociologist at Swansea University, Dr. Ashley Frawley, and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. And you know the drill on Dewbs Co by now, don't you? It's not just about us here and our thoughts. No, it is not. It's about you as well at home. What's on your mind tonight? What's got you talking? What are you thinking about? What's your thoughts on all the topics and what have I missed? What am I not talking about that I should be? Get in touch with me. You can email me gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Don't forget, of course, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, listen to us on the radio. We've got an app, a podcast. We're pretty much everywhere. Alex, you was my first email tonight asking me, what do you think, Michelle, to the fact that the Lib Dems took over Hull City Council at the last local elections? Well, I say, quite frankly, good. I think that it was time for a change in the city. We shall see what happens with it. By the way, turnout was really quite low. I was just having this conversation, actually. Turnouts for local elections are so ridiculous. I think in Hull it was something like 23, 26%. Do you go out and vote? I have to confess, I didn't. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on all of that. Right, got to kick it off with a topic that I can't bear. This is my caveat. You will know if you watch this show by now. I find Partygate and Beergate, I just find it ridiculous. I find it so boring. I find it a storm in a teacup. I've hated the way this has been jumped on purely for political gain. I've always wondered to myself, so I have, about double standards. And you know what I think about this already. But what do you think about it? Are you interested in this story? I'm not really, but I am interested in the whole double standards. You will have just seen in the news headlines there that Keir Starmer, he said that if he gets a fine, basically for the curry and the beer stuff, he will resign. So apparently did Angela Rayner. Ashley, I might die of boredom if I spend too long on this topic, but nonetheless, I do think it's important, actually, that we pick up on it, given the press conference that's just happened. Your thoughts?
Well, I was very glad to see that you pulled up that tweet because I thought that I was the only one who remembered very distinctly Starmer making a big deal about the fact that a Prime Minister was under criminal investigation, and that was enough for him to resign.
And Angela Rayner did it, by the way, as well.
And now, well, suddenly it's, well, let's all wait and see. The same kind of line that that Boris Johnson was criticised for taking. And I think also the call for him to resign because there was an investigation was reckless, because he was basically saying, look, there's no smoke without fire. And you want, obviously, to give your enemies the same rights as you would give yourself, precisely because you may one day find yourself in this situation. And that's an important lesson for anyone who brings on laws and bans and so on, because it benefits them against their enemies, because eventually it's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah, what's that saying? Let him without sin cast the first stone, is it, I think? Anyway, Lee, are you as energised by this topic as I am or not?
I'm not really energised, no. We have discussed it many times, and I feel the same way as I did before, which is the issue is less about rule breakers, although people rightly feel aggrieved that it's one rule for them and one rule for us. But people should always focus on the rules themselves. When people in government were breaking these rules, they were signalling they didn't believe in these rules. They didn't think that they were necessary. And indeed, for many members of society, those harsh lockdown rules were not necessary because most people were not at serious risk. So that's what we should be focused on. I hate to repeat myself, but we should be focusing on the regime of rules, often very authoritarian rules, that the entire country was placed under for 2 years with very limited parliamentary oversight. We still need to be asking questions about that time, questions that go beyond, was it 18 minutes for a curry scheduled at the end of the day? These are petty matters, really, relative to the whole way in which we were governed over the past 2 years. We still need to ask those kinds of questions.
Lee, I completely agree with you. I've always said that this whole thing I've found very petty, but nonetheless, I don't find double standards petty. I can't help it. Scarlett, your thoughts?
I think there's an enormous... The reason that the police investigated what was going on in Number 10 was because by that time we knew there were a number of parties. There was beer being taken in suitcases. Allegra Stratton had giggled about what she should say in a press conference about parties. So there was no question that when the police did investigate, that we knew that wrongdoing had gone, and there've been 50 people who've been fined. So it's completely different to where the Durham police have. I mean, the Daily Mail have done 7 days running a front page thing about it. So they've pushed into. I think Keir's absolutely right. I think he's completely right to say, I'll go because I shouldn't be breaking the rules.
But hang on, though, because Scarlett, he said, didn't he, and I just put it up there on the screen, and he was saying Boris should resign at the point of investigation.
But I tried to explain the difference was when the police investigated, we knew there'd been wrongdoing. We knew there were parties.
I can see that my eyes work, Scarlett, and I can see that there's been wrongdoing. I can see it with my own eyes. Come on.
What?
They're there with curries and beers and all the rest of it.
They've been working... They'd been campaigning all evening, and at the end of the day, they had a curry together, right? Because the restaurants were closed. That's fine.
No, the hotels was doing room service. Don't wash with me there.
We will find out. There's no question. I mean, if Keir broke the law, he will resign. But what I think the people who are praying that he does not get a fine are the Tories. Because how can you have Keir saying, I will resign if I get a fine, and Boris saying, no.
Well,
so it puts them in a very difficult position.
Dear viewers, as I said, I'll end as I started. I couldn't care less about any of this. I think it's all ridiculous. Scarlett says it was a bit of food at the end of the day. I say the clue there is at the end of the day. So when you finish your work, you go home. You have your own food there, or if you're in the hotel, you can have room service. Anyway, I got that off my chest. At least I feel like I've covered it. What do you think? Do you care about this topic? That is my question to you. Anyway, let's move on, shall we, to other matters. Some might say much more important matters. President Putin has cast NATO as the aggressor in Russia's annual victory parade. He says the Russian troops are fighting to defend the motherland from NATO plans to seize Russian-held lands. I've got to say, though, there was some kind of wondering here about, is he going to use today's situation basically to declare war on Ukraine and escalate things? He didn't now. Of course, it's been 10 weeks since the invasion of Ukraine. What do we think to this? I want to start with you. He was quite specific today, wasn't he? Victory Day, this is quite a big deal in Russia. It's a holiday. President Putin, and this is nothing new, he's pushing and saying that this is essentially NATO's fault. Lots of people disagreeing with this. Where do you stand on it, Lee?
Well, Putin himself has engaged in aggressive war against Ukraine. There's no doubt about that. The issue is that the speech gives you an insight into the way that the Kremlin and the entire Russian political spectrum has thought about Ukraine for decades. So we don't have to go very far back to find people like the current CIA director, who, when he was ambassador to Moscow, warning Washington that the expansion of NATO into Ukraine is the reddest of red lines for everybody across the entire political spectrum, from Kremlin knuckle draggers through to the most liberal critics of the regime.
Let me just ask you on this one particular point, because I found it interesting. In your mind, was there ever assurances given that NATO would not expand further? Because depending on who you listen to, what you believe, what you think, there's very mixed messages on this. Some people say that Russia were given an assurance that it wasn't going to happen. Other people say nonsense, no such formal assurance took place.
It really rests on the way that you interpret some remarks that the Americans made to Gorbachev towards the end of the Cold War about NATO not moving a 1 inch eastwards. So there were some kind of vague comments made, and it depends what spin you put on those. But quite apart from that, about whether there were assurances made, the Russians made clear all the way through the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s that they considered the expansion of NATO humiliating for Russia and a threat to Russian security interests. And right before the war, Putin called on the Americans to engage in negotiations to create a neutral buffer zone between NATO and Russia and to stand down long-range missiles capable of hitting Russia. So I think there's no doubt, I think regardless of any specific comments that were made here or there, the whole trend of Russian policy is very clear, and members of the current Biden administration made that perfectly clear when they were serving in diplomatic capacities elsewhere, that they saw the expansion of NATO as a threat. And many in the United States establishment considered the expansion premature, reckless, provocative. So anybody that accuses me or anybody that draws attention to this history of being, some kind of Putin apologist or whatever, is simply ignoring established history. This has been the Russian line for 2 decades plus. So what Putin's saying when he's accusing NATO of aggression is simply coming out with the line that he has been saying for a very long time. And there are many military analysts that draw attention to the stationing of long-range missiles in Ukraine as being the thing that initially triggered the timing of the invasion. So he's overlooking his own aggression, his own intervention, his own destruction of Ukrainian sovereignty and so on. But he is pointing towards real things that NATO has done and, from his perspective, threatening Russia in the process. And so this is important to say that he views this invasion as a preventive and defensive measure, even though it is at the same time an aggressive step.
In a second, I want to bring Scarlett in for now, but in a second I want to come back to you because I want to ask you, about the whole NATO expansion. We know that imminently, potentially anyway, Sweden, Finland could look to be joining NATO. So I'm interested in your view in a second on what you think that might mean. But for now, Scarlett, your thoughts on it?
I completely agree with Lee, and I do remember back with the fall of the Soviet Union that actually the problem was the West felt so triumphalist that they didn't actually realise that they had to think long term about how to deal with an injured country. I mean, it's a bit like Germany after the First World War. Is actually when somebody is lost, you don't push it in. On the other hand, we had countries like Poland who their hatred of Russia goes back years. But I think at the moment, one of the other things that is a real problem is that we keep on hearing what Putin's going to do by experts, by Kremlinologists, and they're always wrong. I mean, we heard he was going to declare victory today. He was going to make things worse. Absolutely, declare war. I mean, none of those things happened. And what I find so frightening is how much we don't know about what's really going on with this guy. And then, I mean, to add the sort of tragicomic stuff is you've got the Daily Mail that every day. So he's had Parkinson's, he's had long COVID. Today he walked with a limp while the Daily Telegraph correspondent said that his limp had gone. I mean, these people are concentrating, trying to make Putin out to be a madman, when actually we need to deal with this guy because he is truly dangerous.
Ashley?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'm sorry to have too much agreement. I will bring in one point that I'm not sure about, but I've been very disturbed by this coverage of Putin in the press, and just today as well. Was it Ben Wallace was comparing Russia to Nazi Germany, Putin to Hitler, and this is really worrying because this is not World War II. We need to deal with the situation that we have in front of us. We need to understand understand what's going on, but also both sides casting each other as Nazis means that there's no chance of any peaceful way out of this. The only option is to escalate the conflict, because what happens, why would you appease? Everybody knows that the policy of appeasement was a disaster. So now any kind of negotiation becomes appeasement, and I think that's really dangerous. But the one thing that I'm concerned about and that I'm not sure about is so many countries were joining NATO because they feared Russian aggression. So, and on top of that, we can recognize also that NATO has been reckless, that NATO is not innocent here, but we now have a situation where the Ukrainians want to fight. So what do we do about that? You can say, a plague on both your houses, and then what does that mean? We just walk away? Westerners wash their hands of it? I don't know.
We're looking at you.
I'm looking at
Lee, as the resident international affairs expert.
Yeah, because Lee's debate with Frank Furedi, I recommend people go and have a look at it on GB News on Anaya Falarin's show, was really instructive in terms of we do have a serious stalemate here because the Ukrainians have put forward this sovereign desire to fight to fight the Russians and to take
to be in charge of their own destiny, so to speak. Yeah. Lee, what's the answer?
Well, when it comes to NATO's involvement, the more that foreign powers get involved in your politics, the less you are in control of your own destiny. So Russia is intervening in Ukraine, but now NATO is intervening in Ukraine. One of the things that Putin drew attention to in his speech was the fact that although Ukraine is not in NATO, NATO has been in Ukraine for a long time, arming them, training them, reorganising the militaries. One of the reasons why the military didn't fold when the Russians engaged is because NATO's already started to use Ukraine as a kind of cat's paw against Russia, and that isn't working out well for the Ukrainian people. And the more that NATO gets involved and turns this into a long-term proxy war against Russia, which is clearly what's happening. So US and UK have already declared the goal is to push Russia out of Ukraine and ideally topple the Putin government. The more that NATO's interest and agenda takes over, the less the Ukrainians are in control of their own destiny. So, of course, the Ukrainians, they should be supported insofar as if they want to buy arms to equip their personnel to fight the Russian invasion, I have no objection to selling them weapons to defend themselves. But the more NATO kind of takes over the direction of the war effort, the less the Ukrainians are in charge of their own destiny.
See, we've just got an email in, and I will just read this out because I feel we get this sentiment frequently when we try to have these conversations. So Sue's just written in and said, your Russian-loving panel tonight is evil. And she's saying that they're switching off. I don't know if you're still with us, Sue, or if you have indeed switched off. But I find this absolutely fascinating. Because to me, as a non-expert on international affairs, I think it is surely dangerous to simply ignore one entire perspective of this conflict and bury your heads in the sand and literally just say, evil, 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 bye-bye, evil, evil, evil. I think to do that, you're doing yourself a monumental disservice in terms of, A, understanding what's caused this, B, understanding or trying to understand what will actually resolve this. So I personally think, Sue and anyone else that has this view, these kind of conversations, they are essential to have. Am I wrong?
No, I completely agree with you, but it is intimately linked to the important point that Ashley raised about World War II. Because it seems to me that the last time there was any real absolute moral clarity in this country was the Second World War, right? The fight against fascism, because Nazism is the ultimate evil, the Holocaust, etc., etc. So there's a constant tendency when anything comes up that people want to shut down debate and impose a moral framework on, that we constantly reach to World War II. And both sides in this are cosplaying World War II. Putin gave his speech, and there were people dressed up as Soviet-era heroes riding on the old Soviet tanks and so on. And Boris Johnson has been doing his best to cosplay as Winston Churchill, in his speech to the Ukrainian parliament, and as you know, Ben Wallace also comparing Putin to Hitler and so on. It is an attempt to impose a black and white schema onto a situation which is incredibly complicated. And if we operate like, frankly, I have to say this, like children who think that the world is composed of goodies and baddies, and that's the framework through which we perceive international affairs, then we'll never understand why the world works, because there's just infinite number of shades of grey. And we'll never understand how we can intervene to change the world, to settle conflicts and to bring about peace.
Scarlett, did you want to...
Well, what worries me, I agree with everything Lee said, and what worries me is what are we doing? Because I mean, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, Ben Wallace have all started making war noises, and I don't think as a country we have any idea of what it would take. I mean, you know, are they sort of making the war noises and we're going to sit back and cheer Ukraine from the sidelines? Or more dangerous, are we going to get involved without actually understanding what it really means?
Well, Nigel has written in. I mean, the emails are flying in on this topic. So Nigel says, so let me get this straight, Michelle. In 1940, would you have sat down and said, let's all sit down and listen to Hitler because he may have had a point? I mean, how do you even respond to this? I mean, I don't want to just keep coming back to you, but I'm conscious that this is indeed the area that you've studied and it's your expertise. So I'm almost bowing to your expertise on this. Like, where do we go with this? Because I just find it such an oversimplification of an incredibly complex issue. But what would you say to Nigel? You shouldn't be trying to understand those that are evil, essentially.
Well, if you decide, you know, ahead of the fact this person is evil, then of course you don't have any reason to understand why they're acting like that. Why do they do the things they do? How can we respond to that? How can we prevent these things happening in future? It's a moralistic approach to the world. And the policy of appeasement, what the policy of appeasement means is you have certain interests and I have certain interests. And in order to maintain peace, I might have to reckon with your interests and we might have to compromise. So this goes to the point that Scarlett raised about the Western triumphalism. We didn't see any reason to reckon with Russia's interests. Oh, it's weak. Oh, we've won, so we can trample on them, we can do whatever we like. Now, is that a useful policy? In the past, before Munich, before World War II, the policy of appeasement was just understood to be sensible diplomacy. If a country is large and powerful and is able to disrupt the peace, if its interests are not served, then there's a sensible thing to do, which is try to reckon with that country's interests in the existing order. You try to create an order in which I don't win everything. I don't trample on you all the time. I don't just ignore your interests. You also have some interest in maintaining the status quo. That's what appeasement meant. But it was completely discredited because this country and others chose to appease a leader that could not be appeased. So it was the wrong policy for that particular state at that particular time. Hitler could not be appeased because he was determined to build an empire in Europe. Now, I don't believe that Putin is that kind of leader. And I've pointed to many times on this programme, he does not have the economic or military power to be able to create an empire in Europe. All this idea that he wants to re-establish the Soviet Union, conquer Eastern Europe, he only has 280,000 men in his military. That's not even enough to occupy Ukraine. To occupy Ukraine, you would need over 1 million men. I said right at the start of this conflict that he was a relatively weak leader in a relatively weak and brittle regime, and Russia is a relatively weak military power. I think events have proven me right. He has not been able to take cities 20 kilometres from Russia's border. Right? He has been humiliated in the field. He has taken a large chunk of territory, but he hasn't achieved his war aims. He's coming out of this significantly weakened. So, but he's still able to disrupt the peace because he's still one of the military great powers. So it is a sensible policy for the maintenance of peace that you don't just, from a position of strength, trample on everybody else's interests and say, oh, well, you're evil, so we don't need to listen to you, when you still have the power to disrupt the peace.
Yeah. Also, it's not entirely true that no one ever sought to understand what Nazism was. I mean, people were writing some of the things that we still read now, trying to understand what is National Socialism. It's not like people just decided, oh, these people are evil, that's the end of it. You know, and people will say, oh, well, we shouldn't have to deal with evil people. That's the kind of outlook that you get from I'm sorry to say, some young people who are inexperienced in politics who will say, well, we shouldn't have to, argue against such and such. They're just beyond the pale, so we just won't have them on a platform, that sort of thing. It's the same kind of logic. Sure, maybe we shouldn't have to, but we do. We do need to understand. We can't just label people as evil. Oh, well, they're Hitler. And nor did people do that in the 1930s. It's important to understand. They actually did try to seek to understand.
But also,
Nazism.
I think it's absolutely key. I just want to make this point. Seeking to understand something, seeking to discuss it, is nowhere near the same as condoning anything. And this is a point that seems to be lost. And I can see my inbox. It's absolutely flooding in with people being quite rude, actually, as is, it's your right. I believe in all opinions being valid and welcome. But people have been so rude and saying, you're Putin apologist, you're Putin apologist. And to me, you're saying this almost as an attempt to stop a conversation. And I don't mean to be rude, but that's not going to work with me, because I actually think that this conversation is an incredibly important conversation to have, because all of us share the same goal, which is for this conflict to be resolved as quickly as possible. And sticking fingers in ears and just shouting psycho, psycho, evil, evil, I just don't really see how that's going to do it. I think it's a massive oversimplification, and I can't apologise, actually. I won't apologise for seeking to understand a complex international conflict. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'm sure that you will. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm going to take a quick break. I've got quite a few different things coming up, actually. I want to talk about the future of the United Kingdom. I want to talk about accents. I might even talk about child influencers. We'll see how we get on. I'll speak to you in a couple of minutes. Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'll return to some of our debates in just a moment, but for now, heading over to Tamsin with a news update.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Well, we can just bring you some breaking news that we're hearing from Buckingham Palace, that the Queen will not attend the state opening of Parliament tomorrow. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Prince Charles will take her place at Westminster. The Duke of Cambridge will also be in attendance. Well, in a statement released in the last couple of minutes, the Palace said Her Majesty continues to experience episodic mobility problems. and after speaking with her doctors has reluctantly decided that she will not attend. Well, this follows an announcement that other senior royals will also be taking over the Queen's duties in hosting the garden parties at Buckingham Palace. Just to...
Well, awful news, of course. Your Majesty, we wish you all the very, very best. I have to say, my inbox is still on fire off the back of that conversation that we've just been having about the Ukraine and Putin the situation. And I just want to make the point, because I'm astonished that I need to make the point, but I'll make it nonetheless. Every sane-minded individual would condone what is going on in Ukraine, the killing of innocent people. It is appalling. It is not condoned, certainly not encouraged in any way, shape or form, nor have I heard any apology, actually, for anything that's gone on in this panel at all. But I stand by and I maintain that conversations are absolutely essential to create understanding. And crucially, the thing that not enough people seem to be talking about, if you ask me anyway, is the resolution of all of this. How on earth does this reach a closure as quickly and as safely? I mean, we've probably gone past that point, but as safely and as quickly as possible. Anyway, my inbox is flying in. You are not backwards in coming forwards in telling me what you're thinking tonight. Continue GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, Thursday's election in Northern Ireland saw a historic win for Sinn Féin in the Northern Ireland Assembly. But today, the DUP, the main opposition party, says it will not go back into Stormont until its concerns about post-Brexit trading arrangements are resolved. Now, I think, in fact, I'm certain, Dougie Beattie, our Northern Ireland correspondent, joins me now. Good evening to you, Dougie. What is the latest?
Well, the latest has been we're back to where we were before these elections. If you remember, the DUP First Minister, Paul Givan, resigned over the head of the protocol. The protocol has taken out consent out of Northern Ireland. Of course, the Good Friday Agreement was built around consent. It means that we are governed by Europe. We have no MEPs and we have no way of looking at divergence between ourselves and the UK's trading agreements and laws. So that brings the very existence of the trading inside the Union into question. It replaces Article 6, the Act of the Union. In this election, the DUP went forward. They started off with 28 seats. The Sinn Féin had 27. They came back. Sinn Féin has 27. The DUP has 25. But Jim Allister, out of the True Unionist Voice, who campaigned against the protocol, took 66,000 votes out of the DUP. You can see exactly where those 3 seats went to. So at that point, this is a warning to the DUP from their unionist voters that they are not happy with the situation. And Jeffrey Donaldson is now caught in the position where he daren't go back into government. He has been promised the whole way along, and he said in his press conference today, I have been promised, and of course none of those promises came to pass, and he lost 3 seats and lost the majority inside the House behind us. So he's not going to get back up into government at all, and he says that he won't even think about it until there is movement on the protocol. Now, the Irish Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, the Prime Minister, if you like, has suggested that both these things should be done at the same time. The DUP are saying, no, this happened before, we were promised, it didn't happen, yous move first. Sinn Féin are caught in possibly a worse position, because they are not only the largest party in the north now, they are also the largest party in the south, but don't govern in any, because they haven't got enough to form a government in the Republic, and they can't form a government on their own in the north because we are held in a Hunt-style government where it has to be coalition. There has to be consent from both sides of the community. So things in Northern Ireland have gone forward, but actually stood still. I can nearly hear Sonny and Cher playing in the background because it is Groundhog Day, and I don't think it's going to go any further until the protocol is actually looked at. Fascinating stuff, Dougie. Thanks for your insight there. Scarlett, I'll pick up with you on this one.
You know, for many people, actually, I think a lot of people were shocked, actually, by Sinn Féin, the result that they actually received. Was it a couple of days ago? I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Well, I think we got the results probably by Saturday, but the voting was on Thursday.
Yeah, it feels like an absolute lifetime ago. And one of the things that I think is quite a shame is for the people in Northern Ireland. When you look at Sinn Féin and the way that they actually kind of canvassed and all the rest of it, it was not so much in terms of border polls and Northern Irish protocols. It was more about the issues of the day, the cost of living, how it's going to affect your average man on the street. So I think actually being in this situation now where there potentially is not going to be a quickly established government, I think it's a shame actually for those people who voted out of concerns for their current day-to-day life. But nonetheless, what do you think about it all?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Northern Ireland, the complicated thing about Northern Ireland is that the Good Friday Agreement was set up with Protestants and Catholics, sort of Republicans and Unionists against each other. And what we've got now, interestingly enough, is actually the Alliance Party that came third, right? So Sinn Féin actually didn't increase their vote. I mean, as Dougie said, the Unionists lost to the TUV, but they're all Unionists. So actually, that was the same. But the people who really increased their vote was the Alliance. Now, the Alliance...
Didn't they go from something like 8 to 17 or something?
Yeah, I think like 19. I mean, and they are not... I mean, they're secular. They're very, very keen on saying, you know, we're not going to do one side or the other. And I think what's so terrible about English, I mean, British mainland politics, is we look at things... And so, you know, Brandon Lewis talks to the DUP. They are the important people. I mean, actually, if you look at the polling, most of Northern Ireland, I mean, it's only a majority by a little bit, but most of them actually don't care about the protocol. That isn't the big deal for them, right? It's only the unionists, the unionists that care. And actually, it's a bit like what we were saying before, is what we need to be thinking about is solutions rather than dividing people. And I just look at the Alliance Party, you look at the young people who haven't grown up in the Troubles, who are really, really proud of TV things like Derry Girls, films like Belfast, that actually Northern Ireland has changed enormously. And we in Westminster is still stuck in this time warp of Labour is the SDLP, they're not Sinn Féin, they're the sort of more liberal Catholics, and the Conservatives are the DUP, and this isn't taking us anywhere, and actually. I mean, most of Northern Ireland, they don't want to leave. I mean, it doesn't matter what your religion is. Over half of them do not want to leave the United Kingdom. But we need to be talking to them rather than always talking to the extremists.
Yeah, Ashley?
Yeah, I would say I have to agree. I think it's easy to read too much. But that's what's happening is people are reading too much into this as though it's this huge upsurge for a united Ireland. But actually, if you look more closely, it's that while Sinn Féin has benefited from some internal divisions, and the real story is the Alliance Party. I mean, now, it's not that that's the real story. I don't want to downplay that this is an historic result. But at the same time, it's not that people are, you know, wanting to go back to the past. It's the opposite. I think people, particularly young people, want to move forward and focus on issues like housing policy, you know. And instead, we're reading the opposite, that this is actually a desire to break up the union, a resurgence of that desire. I'm not sure that that's the case.
Yeah, I don't see this as a massive kind of tick box for, yay, look, a step closer to dissolving the union. I don't see it like that at all. I see it probably, Lee, as a bit of almost a rejection, a further rejection, if you like, of Brexit because of this whole Northern Ireland Protocol, people wanting perhaps to be maybe slightly closer to Europe, if anything, at all. Where do you stand on this, the whole Brexit thing?
Well, I think just maybe to differ a little bit from Scarlett, I mean, it's not that the UK government, you know, likes to talk to the extremists. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 institutionalised power sharing between sectarian parties. So it is a sad fact that from the formation of Northern Ireland as a statelet, it was designed, gerrymandered, to give a Protestant and Unionist majority in that area. And that part of the population tyrannised the Catholic minority for many decades until they erupted in protest and then encountered violence and the Troubles began. And the way that conflict was settled was to institutionalise power sharing between the so-called nationalists and the so-called unionists. So it is impossible to form a government in Stormont without the agreement of the two sides. So it's not a choice. That's the way that the peace was agreed. And it has institutionalised a sectarian divide in Northern Irish politics, which although, yes, OK, there's some movement at the margins with the alliance and so on, it's still there. I mean, I visited Belfast for the first time in my life last year.
Did
It's
you?
remarkable. The peace walls, there are more peace walls now than there were back in the 90s. Lots of communities are still very polarised and divided around these identities. It's a reflection of the institutions as they've been created. So it is not possible under the Good Friday Agreement to create a government in Stormont just with Sinn Féin and with the Alliance or something like that. You can't cobble together that kind of arrangement. The unionists have to agree. The unionists won't agree until the Northern Ireland Protocol is revised. And unfortunately, the EU has shown zero interest in renegotiating the protocol, which obviously your viewers will remember was negotiated under duress because Boris Johnson's government was desperately trying to enact Brexit after many, many extensions, and so had to go for the Northern Ireland Protocol as the least worst option. So the EU doesn't really want to renegotiate it. And the fundamental problem in Northern Ireland for the British state is that it cannot unilaterally say, OK, we renounce the protocol. Legally, it could, right? Parliament could just decide we're not abiding by the protocol anymore, or we trigger Article 16 and we're not abiding by the protocol anymore. The problem is the British state does not have enough sovereign authority in Northern Ireland to do that because large parts of the community do not accept the legitimacy of the British state, and they never have done. And part of the difficulty is shifting demographics. So initially Northern Ireland was gerrymandered to produce a permanent unionist majority, but just recently the number of Catholics in the province has overtaken the number of Protestants. So the direction of travel, it seems to me, is towards the reunification of Ireland. That seems to me to be overall, and I expect that to happen within my lifetime.
Do you? Controversial, I don't. I don't think that'll happen. Do you? Get in touch with me. By the way, is anyone out there in Northern Ireland? I want to hear from you tonight. What are you thinking? Get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And look at that. It's just gone 6:45. How does time fly so quickly? Going to take a very quick break, and I'll be back with more in just a couple of minutes.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, could we see a surge in far-left extremism in the wake of the US Supreme Court's abortion bombshell? Will journalist and nemesis of Antifa, Andy No, weighs in. And there'll be unfiltered opinion from Neil Oliver, positive Professor Carol Sikora, and my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the senior reporter at the iNewspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the broadcaster Bev Turner. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. A quick reminder as to who is keeping me company tonight. Lee Jones, the Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. Also, a sociologist at Swansea University, Dr Ashley Frawley, and former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Now, you always know that it's not just about us here on this show, it's about you at home as well. Lots of you still writing in about the topics that we've been discussing, particularly the Ukrainian-Russian situation. Lots of you divided there, by the way, on Partygate, Beergate, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I call it Boringgate now. I'm so over it, I can't even tell you. But yeah, a little bit of a divide there. Some of you proper into it and think that Keir should absolutely be handing his resignation in. Some of you are a little bit more like me and you couldn't care less. Anyway, get this right. I want to talk to you about accents. I'm from Hull. I don't say that as a subtle hint, I drop it frequently. And on my panel, ladies and gentlemen, so is somebody else. Now, you've probably heard all of their voices by now, and I suspect if I asked you, based on voice alone, accent alone, which one is from the same city as me, you probably wouldn't be able to guess. And the reason I bring this up, by the way, is because how frequently we are judged on the way we speak. Now, you know, in this day and age, you can't seem to discriminate against anyone for anything. You can't discriminate, you know, if someone's old, if they're disabled, if they're, I don't know, racially, religiously, whatever. It seems, though, to me anyway, that you can still get away with class prejudice. Accents, for example, the Hull accent, my one, is repeatedly judged, isn't it? Apparently, if you sound like me, you're a bit dense, quite frankly. I'll say it as it is. I personally think that's a little bit harsh. But the other member of my panel that is from Hull and sounds much better than me, let's be honest, is Lee. You're from Hull, aren't you? Yeah. We have very different accents. This is all, by the way, about, there's a report out today that's talking about people getting judged in their workplace or for workplace, you know, like prospects because of their accents. That's why I'm discussing this. Anyway, Lee, back to accents. Hull accents, we're from the same place. We sound very different. Did you make a conscious effort to change your accent, would you say?
No, I didn't make a conscious effort, but I often say I had it beaten out of me at school. So at the age of 13, I won a government scholarship to go to a private school, and I had a very broad Yorkshire accent at that time. And, you know, I was incredibly nastily bullied for it, right? Teachers would call me Lee Jones from down the coal mine, for example. So I think as just a survival process, I just kind of adapted to that more, you know, middle-class environment. And then, you know, I went away to university and I suppose became even more posh in the way that I sound, as we would say.
Yeah, very posh. I'd love to know, all these kids all these teachers that called Lee down the corner, I'd love to know where you are. I bet you're not sat on GB News, are you? No, I bet you're not. Scarlett, what do you think? Any prejudice for class, accent?
No, I think it's absolutely. I think it's fine if you're from the Republic of Ireland or Scotland, and everybody loves those accents. But if you're from the West Country, you're definitely thought to be a bit of a yokel. And I mean, I went for a job at Southampton Television, Southern Television, based in Southampton, and they said, "Oh no, you know, you've got a Devon accent. We're not having you." Oh my! So
a Devon accent,
a Devon, and I don't even think I did. But anyway, I had told them that I'd lived in Plymouth for a couple of years. But I think that it is incredible how difficult it is for people who do not have it doesn't have to quite be received pronunciation, but somebody like Lee, who is just about that. But if you've got a strong regional accent, it does make people think that you are more stupid than you are.
Yeah, I think
you're telling me. If I had £1 for everyone that called me a thicker, based on my accent, I'd be minted. I tell you, I'd never need to work
again. I've got a North
again.
American accent, which means that most people think that I'm American, and so I bear the brunt of anti-Americanism quite a lot. And often from people who think of themselves as quite progressive, will come after me and say things like, how dare you, as an American, feel like you can pass judgments on the UK, because I'll say something that's not left-wing enough or something like that. And I think, oh, so usually you're for immigrants, right? Until an immigrant wants to have a say and has a quasi-American accent. But I am Canadian, and I'm from up north, and up until, maybe 8 years ago, I still sounded like I was going to go hunt a moose. So.
Well, Bernard says, Michelle, you should try being from Wigan. You should think yourself lucky. Bernard says that he had to change his accent so that people could understand him. Claire says, I've got no problem with accents, but it's bad grammar. She has a problem with it. There you go. Lots of you. Rod says, I'm from Scotland, and people down here take the mick. Do you know what I say? I just say, be yourself, be happy with who you are, and ignore people that desperately try to put you down. That's what I say. Anyway, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much to my panel, and thank you as well for your company at home. If you've only just tuned in, you can watch us back on YouTube. Or guess what? We've got a podcast now. It's wherever you get your podcast from, Spotify, iTunes, wherever. Anyway, that's all from me, so you have yourself a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. But coming up next, it's Nigel Farage. Nigel, good evening to you. What have you got for us?
Good evening. Well, if Keir Starmer goes, if he gets a fixed penalty notice, should Boris Johnson go too? We'll discuss and debate that. We'll talk about the Queen not being at the state opening tomorrow. We'll talk about Northern Ireland. Goodness me, Sinn Féin top the poll because the Unionists are split. And I've got Lord David Frost, Britain's chief Brexit negotiator, joining me on Talking Pints. I'll ask him about the Northern Ireland deal.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's been a wet start to the week for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That rain is now sinking south, sky clearing behind it, but with further showers expected over the next few days for northern parts of the UK in particular. Low pressure towards the northwest is sending a couple of weather fronts southwards across the UK. Those weather fronts, as they bump into high pressure further east, weaken, but nevertheless still a cloudy night to come for much of England and Wales. Increasingly damp conditions for northern England, the Midlands, Wales as well, that rain reaching the southwest by dawn. Otherwise, Scotland and Northern Ireland see the rain clearing and clear spells, but with showers replacing it. Those showers particularly lively for the west of Scotland, along with a blustery breeze. 8 Celsius in Glasgow first thing, 14 for London, but a damp